Seeking refuge and freedom from persecution, the Jews from Spain, Turkey, Russia, Germany, and Poland set their sights on the New World, the land of freedom and opportunity. Immigration restrictions placed them a mere 90 miles from the United States, on the island of Cuba. The history of the Jews in Cuba begins in 1492, when Christopher Columbus and his associates landed on the northeastern coast of this beautiful island. That same year, the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula were being expelled from Spain by order of King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, and the Roman Catholic Church. The edict was very specific: convert or leave. How many chose to convert, we can never be sure. However, the Jewish community has come to know those who converted as the Moranos. These were Jews who converted publicly, but maintained their Jewish traditions privately. The Catholic Church established courts empowered to seek out these Jews, or conversos, as well as Protestants. The leaders of the Inquisition and priests like Torquemada tortured and executed the accused to ascertain the authenticity of their conversion. While the Roman Catholic world was expelling Jews from Spain and Portugal, the Islamic world was opening its doors to Jewry. The political establishment of Turkey was enthusiastic to receive Jews. Ships were sent to Spain and Portugal to retrieve Jews who were being expelled. A political reason why the Turks and the Muslims welcomed the Jewish community might have been because they offered young men to serve as soldiers of the Ottoman Empire, methods of mercantilism, and existing lines of communication, which were all greatly lacking in Eastern Europe and the Islamic countries of North Africa.
Mi nombre es José Maya. En mi país siempre me trataban de Pepo en vez de Pepe. Aquí puedo ser Pepe y puedo ser José, nada más que José Maya, sin ningún otro apellido, aunque tengo otro apellido que es Sarangá. Nací en Turquía en el año 1910, el 8 de agosto de 1910. Nací en una ciudad que se llama Çorlu, estaba a 60 kilómetros de Estambul. Nosotros vivíamos en una casa, háganse ustedes la idea, que cuando vieron la película Feeling the Roof, exactamente igual. Lo único que sí era una casa muy grande, era de 2 plantas. Entonces la parte de arriba eran los cuartos donde vivíamos con todas las comodidades que se puede vivir en una ciudad donde no existía luz eléctrica, hasta que mi hermano el mayor tenía que ingresar. Era una obligación ser soldado del gobierno a una edad determinada. Y entonces mi padre no quería que mi hermano fuera a la guerra porque sabía que aquello era fatal. Cualquier persona, así muchacho joven que entraba en ese ejército, los maltrataban mucho y por lo regular morían en los campos de batalla. Y entonces fue cuando se decidió, que eso era en el año 20, cuando salimos de Turquía para Cuba.
There were a number of anti-Semitic laws passed in many of the North African Jewish communities. Things as simple as Jews not being able to wear certain types of clothing in public, Jews not being allowed to enter into certain professions, or Jews already in certain professions who cannot practice. For example, if you're a physician, you may not be allowed to practice on Muslims. very similar to the Nuremberg laws of Eastern European, even of Nazi Germany.
Lo dejó todo aquello, bueno, lo pudo venderlo, por supuesto, como se pudo, y llegamos a Cuba en el año 20. En aquel entonces ya había un hermano de mi padre que vivía en Cuba, en Santi Espíritu, una ciudad que se llama Santi Espíritu. Y ahí empezamos. Empezamos, desde luego, como que traíamos siempre el idioma español, pues eso nos valió para que sobre todo mi padre se dedicara a la venta en la calle. Mayormente era ropa, que era tocando puertas por puertas y la gente compraba. Luego mi padre se enfermó y ya nosotros, ya un poquitico mayorcitos, pues tuvimos que trabajar. No pudimos estudiar.
Turkish Jews found reason to come to the New World, South America, and specifically to Cuba, which had a very open, relatively open door policy for Jews. The Jewish communities turned to the New World as the golden opportunity. There are many, many documented stories of exaggeration that the streets of the New World were paved with gold. Compared to the oppressed economies of post-World War I, that was relatively true. For people who were willing to work hard, people who were willing to struggle, and people who were intelligent, the New World did offer opportunities unbeseen in Eastern Europe, and especially also in Sephardic Turkey.
Ahí estoy yo, está mi hermano mayor que ya murió, él está el otro hermano que murió, bueno, todos murieron. El único vivo ahí soy yo.
The exodus from the old countries was to come, and the desire was to go to the United States. Many Jews were lucky to get direct into New York. Others, they couldn't, so they came and they stopped in Cuba, planning to enter in a little bit later into the States. But there was a system of quotas for those countries, and they had to sit and wait. In the meantime, they started to do something in Cuba. They liked it. The weather was right, and they started to make a little bit of money, improve. So what they decided to stay. And then they came for business to New York and came back to Cuba with merchandise, and they became importers and have business relations with the United States. So we stayed, and I was born in Cuba. The first Jewish pioneers that came to Cuba in the 20s or around that, even before 20, they established a small communities. There were, at the beginning, there were two communities, one called Unión Hebrea, Hebrew Union, and the other was the Shevet Ahim, which they established in different communities. They spoke Yiddish. The Sephardic community coming from Turkey, they spoke the Judeo-Spanish, which was the old Spanish spoken in 500 years before in Spain. They could get along with the Spaniards in Havana or the Cubans and do business with them.
El idioma que se hablaba en la casa era propiamente el ladino, un español no propiamente como el que se puede hablar, se hablaba en Cuba ya, pero sí que los entendíamos perfectamente. Es decir, que el ladino, hay cambios, por ejemplo, de decir a un jarro, jarro, a una tijera, tijera, y así algunas palabras, ¿ves? Pero bueno, era español, era prácticamente un español lo que se hablaba en la casa propiamente.
The Jewish exodus from Eastern Europe started in the late 20s. Although there was a continuous exodus from Eastern Europe, specifically after traumas to communities, after the Kishinev pogrom, after the Bialystok pogrom, Jews did their best to leave. Many of them, as they were kicked out of community to community, found refuge slowly migrating west. But eventually, as the New World beckoned to them, we see that in specific periods of spurts of migration, Jews migrated to the New World. Fiddler on the Roof is actually based on an historical reality.
Also, tell me, how much time do you need to sell your house and all your household goods?
Why should I sell my house? Is it in anybody's way?
I came here to tell you that you are going to have to leave Anatevka.
And how did I come to deserve such an honor?
Not just you, of course, but all of you.
What do you mean? But this corner of the world has always been our home. Yes. Why should we leave?
I don't know why. There's trouble in the world. Troublemakers.
Like us?
You aren't the only ones. Your people must leave all the villages. Zolodin, Rablevka. The entire district must be emptied. I have an order here! It says that you must sell your homes and be out of here in 3 days.
How do you sell a house? 3 days? It's impossible. Children. 3 days?
And you who have known us all your life, you'd carry out this order?
I have nothing to do with it. Don't you understand? I wish you wouldn't say me.
I understand.
And suppose we refuse to go?
You will be forced out.
We will defend ourselves.
We'll stay in our homes.
Refuse to leave. We will
Keep our land. Fight against our militia, our army. I wouldn't advise that.
I have some advice for you. Get off my land. This is still my home, my land. Get off my land.
First of all, the Bolsheviks have taken over Russia, Lithuania, and so forth. Life was becoming very difficult. Jewish people were being persecuted. Jewish people there were pogroms, there were all kinds of persecutions. And through the Joint Distribution Committee, my father was able to leave Lithuania in 1924 to Paris. And then from Normandy, he was shipped to Cuba under the auspices of the Jewish organizations. My father was sent to build the railroad lines in Oriente province in Cuba. That was in the eastern part of the province, 850 miles from Havana, together with a number of other Litvaks. Litvaks are the people that are born in Lithuania, they call them Litvaks. And that lasted very short time because they were not strong enough for this very, very hard labor. So they started becoming peddlers.
So between the 30s and the 40s came the Ashkenazi immigration.
In 1939, when the war started, the Germans started to bombard Warsaw. And there was no actually opposition, the Polish army didn't do anything. A train came and they started to load the people on the train, mostly women, children, and older people. And everybody realized that that's already the end because we heard that if you're going on the train, you'll never come back. My luck happened in the morning when I was almost ready to go on the train. A German officer came and said that he needed 10 people, young people, to go to do some work because you had to do the work all the time for the German. So, and he started to point this and this and this and point at me. And I would stick to my mother. I didn't want to go because I didn't want to be separated from my mother. But of course she realized that this was my only salvation because at this moment I would still be alive. So she ran away, she pushed me and she ran away, and I look around, she wasn't there, like mother would do. And they forced me to go on the truck, go to do the work, and I was working the whole day. And in the evening I went back to the apartment, and my sister thought that we all already died. And then we were both together, and we realized that if we stayed with the apartment, they would come and get us again the next day. So we took a chance, because you had to wear a band with the Jewish star. So in the evening, we got dressed and didn't put the star, and went to see a family that we know, non-Jewish, Ukrainian, that we know from before, and see what we told them if we stayed where we are, they'll take us again. So they say, no, we can, it's danger, because if they find you here, they will kill us too. But stay tonight. And the next day they saw again what's going on, so they let us stay. And we stay in that place the way we came to visit, with nothing with us. We stay for 2 years in the storage room, make like a tunnel, build up, and on top full the books, but there was room for 2 people to lie down, and we have a little space for the air to come in. So that was our hiding place. It was very, very difficult to survive. Not talking about, there was no food because, and during the war there was rationing. Since we did not exist, we didn't have any food. And so whatever this man could get on black market, potato. So for 2 years we ate potato for lunch and dinner. If he got a piece of bread, that was like a piece of cake. Only the 2 of us survived, my sister and myself. Everybody who survived from Poland wanted to go to America. So it was almost impossible. You had to wait many years until your quota, until you were able to come to the United States. So my father had one brother that lived in Cuba. And he said that he can get a visa to come to Cuba, no problem. In the meantime, the communists came to Czechoslovakia, so that's why I went to Cuba. So 1950, I went on a cargo ship. In 1952, I had met my late husband. He was a president of Hayas, that's the organization that helped the immigrants all over the world, and also a survivor. When we got married, I tried to come to the United States again to get the visa. It was still hard because I came from communist country, from Czechoslovakia to Cuba. So I was like a suspicious person.
The Nuremberg laws of 1936, in which Germany enacted against the Jewish people, are almost word for word, paragraph for paragraph, phrase for phrase, remarkably similar to edicts of the Roman Catholic Church against the Jews starting in the 15th century in Europe. It's not a question of history repeating itself. It's just that anti-Semitism was a learned behavior that was manifested.
And most of the survivors are now 80s or over the 80. So they're less and less every day. So it's up to the young people, the young generation, to remember what happened.
Life in Havana for the community, we used to live in the Jewish ghetto in old Havana. There was a square area of maybe a mile and a half. That's what originated mostly. Sephardic and Ashkenazis used, that was their entry into Havana.
Que cuando alguna muchacha o muchacho salía con alguien que no era ashkenazí y decía, ay, está saliendo con un turquito o está saliendo con una turquita, ¿no? Había una diferencia en la cultura, en la forma de vivir, había una diferencia. Y yo lo sé porque yo tuve un novio que era sefaradita. Y entonces un novio, quiero decir, cuando tenía 15 años que andaba con un muchacho. Y mi papá no estaba muy contento. Él siempre decía, acuérdate que los turquitos tienen otras costumbres, no son como nosotros. Y yo no lo entendía. Y ahora me doy cuenta que es una cosa completamente tonta, todos somos iguales. Sefaradita era más distinto. Íbamos al club deportivo y un sábado tú no veías Ashkenazim jugando dominó, pero veías casi todos sefaraditas jugando dominó.
I don't know why I knew it or how we were different, but I knew we were different. Like, for instance, I was going to school, and the little kids, the little older boys, whatever, began to call us names. And one of the names they called us would be moros. Ahí va la morita, ahí va la morita, ahí van los moros. And like, you know, making fun of us. And I was like, I don't know why they call me Mora. I'm not a Mora, I'm Cuban, you know? But I knew we were different. And then we had the holidays, Passover and Rosh Hashanah in my home. And I knew my friends, my neighbors, they didn't have any of that. We had it only. And in Passover, sometimes we had to close all the windows because there we didn't have air conditioning or anything. It was very hot. So we were doing Passover, and then the whole neighborhood, a lot of kids began to climb on the, you know, in the Spanish-style construction of the houses, how you have a reja, whatever, and they climbed on the rejas on top of the shutters to see what was going on in the house, because they knew that something strange was going on in the house, and we were just at the Passover doing the matzah and everything. So my mother had to get up, close the shutters, close everything, so that we would be able to have the Seder in peace. And, you know, they make fun, hey, look what they're reading, look what they're reading.
Castro went to Havana University. At the time, I was studying in Havana University. While I was studying for business, he went to law school. And he always was a man that created problems, wanted his way.
I was one of the few Jews that participated in the Cuban Revolution against Batista. I joined the 26th of July movement, headed by Fidel Castro at the very in their beginnings. The circumstances were that one of the people that used to work in one of the stores that I used to work was one of the founders of the 26th of July movement. His name was Eduardo Rodriguez Alemán. He was one of the attackers of the Cuartel Moncada. That's the attack that was the beginning of the actions of the 26th of July movement, 1953, during the carnivals in Santiago de Cuba. I was never aware of that attack, but my friend told me that they were going to be training in Oriente province. He himself did not know, because Castro didn't tell to most of his people that this attack was going to happen.
And President Batista put him in jail. And while he was there in prison, he got amnestia, how do you say, amnesty, and he got out. So from there on, Castro went to exile and then came back later, and he got into the mountains of the Oriente province, and he was fighting for several years from the mountains, creating the revolution and getting more people to join him. So we wake up on January 1st with a new person coming from the mountains with all the soldiers of Castro, and took the presidential palace in a drive from 4 or 5 days throughout the island, from one end to the other end, to come to Havana. And we didn't know. We thought that the intention was to get rid of the dictator, and it happened to be another dictator coming with different ideas. Nobody thought that he was a communist or going to establish a communist regime.
Y quiero aclarar aquí que yo no soy comunista, porque seguro que lo primero que va a empezar a decir después de esta campaña es que nosotros somos comunistas. Seguro. Nuestra filosofía política es bien clara. Nosotros, antes que nada, sentimos los intereses de nuestra patria y de nuestra América, que es también una patria grande de todos nosotros. Queremos defender los intereses de nuestro pueblo. Queremos la independencia política y la independencia económica. Que cese la explotación y establecer regímenes de justicia social dentro del más amplio cuadro de libertades humanas. Las libertades humanas por encima de todo, y con ella la justicia social. Esa es la filosofía del movimiento 26 de julio.
But he never disclosed his ideas other than getting rid of the dictator. Once he took power, he started to say, now we start the revolution. We thought that he was going to take the military outfits and get a regular jacket and tie, become the president. It wasn't that the case. He put each one of the lieutenants, they used to call in Spanish comandantes, each of the friends that were fighting in the mantle with him was placed in each one of the ministries. So practically it took everything, control of everything.
What will happen to your agrarian reform program?
It's marching. It's marching. Our agrarian reform plan is marching.
Even if you are not prime minister?
Like the earth around the sun, our agrarian reform is marching.
In 1959, we saw that there were different types of laws that were in place. First, he took the land from the farmers and to the big landowners, and he wanted to say the agrarian reform. The second thing, he started to take the banking industry, and the third thing, he came to take our business in the shoe industry. We were established in the shoe business, but they said, well, we are going to intervene in this business for 6 months because you are stopping the shoe industry. We never did anything like that. We were doing normal business. We sold materials, we bought the shoes back, we distributed the shoes, etc. And we waited for several months, nothing happened. So we decided a couple of weeks after they took over our business that my father-in-law, Moises Egosi, should leave the country right away because they were constantly bothering him. So he came to Miami, and we waited.
Le estamos demostrando cómo es posible unir todo el pueblo tras esa consigna. Y cómo con el respaldo del pueblo, donde hombres de todas las clases sociales y de todas las ideas se han unido, mantener un régimen de libertades como el que se mantiene en Cuba y se mantendrá siempre, porque el día que no se pueda mantener renunciamos a la idea y nos retiramos. Por la fuerza, nada, nunca, jamás contra el pueblo.
Right away. His speeches, I get the way he was talking, promising. I don't recall exactly the speeches, but the result was that the people think that there will be a big change, and then the capitalists have nothing to do there. My husband had a factory, he had, I don't remember how many people working for him, and Castro brainwashed them that all of a sudden my husband became the capitalist, the enemy, and the workers wouldn't even say hello to him because the Castro already promising that they will own the factory. I mean, Castro's people and the propaganda, communistic propaganda. And that's what we realized, that it's time to leave. We left Cuba on like Christmas time on '59, telling everybody that we are just going for vacation to Miami because otherwise we would be considered contra-revolutionary because people are were afraid even to leave.
Our business was one of the first ones that was taken away. And all the clothing, no electrical effects, no jewelry, no money, but the clothing we could take. And I took all the clothing I could, and I took a Cuban coffee calador de café cubano, y una lata de café cubano. Yo dije, not long it's going to last me, but that's okay. And my children, and that's it. I could bring only the pictures that I had in my home from when we got married and from when my children were little. But my family pictures from my whole family, we lost all of those. I think that's why I love old photographs so much. I don't have any pictures from when we were kids. That's what I'm sorry for most of all.
3 months after the revolution, even a little bit before then, we started to see where this revolution was going. And this was going in the direction of communism and dictatorship, which became much worse than the Batista revolution. They structured it very well, and they tricked everyone.
It is clear that the forces of communism are not to be underestimated in Cuba or anywhere else in the world. Secondly, it is clear that this nation, in concert with all the free nations of this hemisphere, must take an ever closer and more realistic look at the menace of external communist intervention and domination in Cuba. The American people are not complacent about Iron Curtain tanks and planes less than 90 miles from their shore. But a nation of Cuba's size is less a threat to our survival than it is a base for subverting the survival of other free nations throughout the hemisphere. Third and finally, it is clearer than ever that we face a relentless struggle in every corner of the globe that goes far beyond the clash of armies or even nuclear armaments. The armies are there and in large number. The nuclear armaments are there. But they serve primarily as the shield behind which subversion, infiltration, and a host of other tactics steadily advance, picking off vulnerable areas one by one in situations which do not permit our own armed intervention. Power is the hallmark of this.
In October of 1960, after having given all kinds of licenses to all the companies to import products and giving them all kinds of permits, people brought hundreds of millions of dollars of merchandise into their warehouses. I used to work for one of the companies, Alberto Bijar and Company, Alberto Bejar. And on the 12th of October of 1960, there was a decree nationalizing 362 companies in Cuba. One of them was our company. I had been a partisan of the revolution, but at that moment, I had already turned against the revolution and I was started to talk. I had not taken any actions, any conspiration, but we were already looking to what to do, because the people that came to occupy that company were former Batista's people that just dressed up as militia. One of them was an employee of the company. I refused to give them the keys, and I told them in words that I cannot mention right now where to put the guns, that were threatening us. And that afternoon, that was the afternoon of October 16th, we were put in jail, interrogated for 3-4 days. We basically had not done anything wrong except to negate the entry into the company. And I left the jail the 20th of October, went to the Casino Deportivo that afternoon where I met my future wife, walking by there. And 2 days later I was at a wedding. I was the best man at a wedding of my best friend, Abraham Bajkovic, and my friend that I had helped during the Cuban Revolution, Eduardo, came to the Patronato de la Comunidad Hebrea and told me that he had my ticket to leave the country because I was no good there and he just wanted me to get out of the country. That night I called my mother. I left all my things that I had in my apartment in Calle 4 in Miramar and left the 23rd of October in the morning to Miami I was interrogated, but my friend had already coached me in what to say. I brought in I left with the ruse of that I was going on a short vacation, so I brought my tennis racket, a bongo drum, a book by Pablo Neruda, and that's how I arrived in this country with $5 in my pocket. I went to the Majestic Hotel on South Beach. It was a hotel that was managed by an ex-Cuban taxi driver by the name of Victor Rebe. And he gave us a room for 4 other guys that were there, had more or less emigrated at the same time. And we stayed in a room for a few months for $10 a week.
Finally, they took the business. By the time I came in September, my father-in-law already went to New York with a little bit of money because we lost, we can say, almost everything. With a little bit of money, we bought a few cases of shoes in New York from the importers there, brought them to Miami, opened a little warehouse, and when I came, he gave me a sample of beach sandal and said, go to the hotel's stores and try to sell them the beach sandal called Zoris in each one of them. So right away I had a job.
Más tarde, cuando los muchachos crecieron, me hice socia del Templo Menora por razones del colegio, porque quería que ellos estuvieran en un colegio hebreo. Y todos los templos nos pedían una cuota muy alta y no teníamos el dinero para poder pagarla. Pero este Templo Menora desinteresadamente le abrió las puertas a muchas familias donde nunca se les cobró nada y siempre se les dijo, vengan, que esta es su casa y cuando ustedes tengan trabajo y tengan los medios de pagar, ya pagarán, y por eso hasta hoy en día pertenecemos al Templo Menora.
They came to my synagogue. There was talk amongst the Cuban colony, the Cuban Jewish colony, that at the Abramowitz synagogue you get in free, which is true. In 1960, the first group came, and I remember they came to my synagogue, at that time the North Shore Jewish Center. Why my synagogue did it, if you ask me? Is it because I already knew the wandering Jew? I think that was the reason why I welcomed the Jews and didn't expect them to pay anything in my synagogue. It was a duty of the synagogue. The Cubans did come to our area, and this became this northern part of Miami Beach. I'm talking about Biscayne Beach, I'm talking about Harding Avenue. They all became the home ground for the newly arriving Jewish, what would you call it, emigres from Cuba. Why? The only answer I can give is, we American Jews, as soon as we hear an accent, we shy away, number one. And number two, we American Jews looked upon the Cuban Jews as wealthy. Oh, they must be stuffed with diamonds and gold and jewelry, and they can make their own way. I think that could be the excuse. I don't know.
At that time, our business had been growing. We went public. We started to make a little money. And then I particularly was invited to join the community. They asked me and a group of other friends to come and help to have a bigger building and fundraise to raise money. And that is the way that I started to work for what it was the Cuban Sephardic Hebrew congregation. Until 1980, we could open the new building that is today in 1200 Normandy Drive in Miami Beach. I became the first president in the new building.
We were lucky to survive, that I owned something to the humanity and to do something for other people. My husband was also very known in the community. He was always a leader. So both of us, we work in the community. He started the Cuba, Círculo Cubano Hebreo, which is today the Cuban Hebrew congregation.
Everybody had to get out. Most of the population of the Jews living in Cuba left the country. There were only about 1,000 or 1,500 Jews left in Cuba of the 10 to 15,000 that used to be there before.
El que diga que es fácil es como en aquel dicho que dice que el que esté libre de pecado que tire la primera piedra. Nada es fácil en Cuba, todo es muy difícil, de una forma u otra. El ejemplo de eso es que no tienen libertad. Solamente con esa palabra ya es bastante. Fue una experiencia muy dura. Estuve viviendo 20 años en el sistema aquel. Es un sistema opresor que hoy en día mucha gente no entienden a comprenderlo, o hoy en día casi se está tratando de destapar la caja de Pandora. La gente está comprendiendo lo que es. En Cuba la vida es muy difícil, y de ser judíos mucho más. En los centros de trabajo no nos daban oportunidad de hacer las celebraciones de las fiestas nuestras, no nos damos permiso para abandonar el trabajo esos días, y nosotros la cogíamos por nuestra cuenta y después nos sancionaban, nos quitaban por ejemplo las vacaciones. Trabajé de relojería. Cuando estaba trabajando en mi casa, en cierta oportunidad era prohibido porque no nos daban autorización para trabajar por nuestra cuenta. Por trabajar me metieron 1 año preso. Como era una entrada extra que tenía toda persona, ellos querían tener controlado a todo el mundo. Y ellos acusan de malversación a todas las personas que se dedican a trabajar por su cuenta, porque las personas necesitan piezas para trabajar, cual recibíamos de los Estados Unidos o comprábamos X piezas que tenían la gente. Y la palabra malversar, yo no sé qué cosa era peor, malversar nosotros al poder trabajar por nuestra cuenta, o ellos el haberle confiscado todas las propiedades al pueblo de Cuba. Todo lo que ellos tenían era robado, nada era de ellos. La isla de Cuba entera era una cárcel que simplemente ellos la gobernaban y se la habían quitado a todo el mundo. Eso sí es malversar, no lo que nosotros hacíamos. Toda la comida hasta el día de hoy está racionada. Había una libreta de abastecimiento, el cual llegaba a cierta cantidad de comidas X, en lugares de abasto de bodegas, el cual te tocaba por la libreta X onza de tal comida, o de arroz, o de papa, o de lo que vayas a comer. Entonces se dedicó el pueblo de Cuba al trueque, al cambio. Por ejemplo, mi oficio me benefició mucho, porque el que más o que menos tenía un reloj, y yo se lo arreglaba. Él no me pagaba, me daban 1 o 2 galones de gasolina, yo caminaba con la gasolina. Le arreglaba relojes a amigos que tenía en el campo, y me daban un pollo, la java de malanga, que era el trueque de trabajo por comida, que es como se vive en Cuba, porque por la libreta nadie vive. Por ejemplo, el derecho en aquella época que yo viví a tener $1, y no $1, 5 centavos de dólar en un bolsillo, te costaba 20 años de presidio. Hoy en día está liberado, porque como van las personas de la comunidad a visitar su familia y Fidel ha liberado el dólar, pues la gente evoluciona más. Por fin, en el año 1978, después de mucho insistir en tratar de venir a este país para reunirme con mis padres después de 14 años, jamás pertenecía a nada del sistema. Siempre era una persona que lo repudiaba y lo repudio donde quiera que esté, porque soy un hombre de mentes libres. Soy un hombre que Dios piensa que Dios le ha dado la libertad a todo ser humano, y esa libertad es derecho inalienable de todo ser humano. El cubano que sale de Cuba no debe guardarle rencor al pueblo de Cuba. El pueblo de Cuba lo han enseñado a vivir bajo la mentira, y con la mentira ha vivido durante tantos años. Es un pueblo que por el temor, el terror implantado por el sistema ha vivido en 2 caras. Un día son revolucionarios a la cara del mundo, y otro día dentro de su corazón dicen: ¿por qué yo hago esto? Porque no me queda más remedio para vivir. Yo creo que hubieron comunistas, hubieron. En este momento hay muchos comprometidos, que es muy diferente. En Cuba se vive presionado por el sistema político continuamente, mañana, tarde y noche. Es medicina en la radio, en la televisión. Todo está controlado por un sistema. No hay otro tipo de mente que
que quiera limpiar esa situación, porque cuando hay alguien que sobresale lo eliminan. Fidel la aprovecha a su conveniencia cuando le conviene con el dolor del pueblo de Cuba. La libertad es indivisible, no se ve, pero se admira la forma con que la gente vive en otros lugares, que hay otro mundo. El pueblo de Cuba ha despertado y en su interior se fija que existe otra cosa.
Many people say, well, but the Jewish community is not prosecuted. They cannot prosecute. The Cuban community in Cuba is 800-900 people. The government uses the Cuban community to attract Jewish people from all over the world to come as tourists. We arrived in 1994, both my wife and myself, to see my sister. We went to Havana to see the Jewish community. The patronato was in total disarray. The roof had collapsed. Birds were all over the place. It was a very dirty place. That was not the place that we had left. The place where I had spent my last night in Cuba.
¿Qué es lo que estaba pasando con la comunidad judía cubana? Y al ver ese patronato que era tan bonito, un orgullo de nuestra comunidad, me tocó mucho.
Today is a pride of us that when somebody comes to Havana, sees we did not fix the outside because we didn't want to brag before all these poor neighborhoods, all these people that have lacked the resources, but inside that building, it's beautiful. But the meaning of being in a Shabbat there with people with such little resources, when you have 80 people, 100 people, puts you on the ground, because with all our affluence here, it may be that the lack of resources makes them to be much more together or feel more the emotions. A Shabbat in Havana is something to really be seen and be lived.
Me siento tan feliz cuando veo que hay 50, 60, 70 personas, miembros de aquí de nuestra comunidad que asisten, que son activos. Cuando veo a los niños subiendo a la bimá, cantando el Adon Olam. Cuando veo a nuestro pequeño Moisés, que tiene ahora 5 años y que dice que dentro de 20 años va a ser rabino. Cuando veo a Moisés tan orgulloso de hacer las bendiciones del vino, las bendiciones del pan el viernes por la noche, cuando nos reunimos como si fuéramos una gran familia de 60, 70 personas para el Shabbat dinner, para el Shabbat lunch, y vemos cómo los niños bailan, cantan, saben hacer los bailes folclóricos, tienen sus grupos de ricudim. Fueron momentos difíciles en el país. Si querías ser activo en la juventud comunista o pertenecer al Partido Comunista, por supuesto no podías ser creyente. Es a partir de los años 90 que hay un cambio en la política del gobierno y en estos momentos puedes ser creyente y puedes ser comunista, el que lo quiera hacer. O sea, eso atrajo a muchas personas, no solo al judaísmo, ocurrió lo mismo con otras religiones, con el catolicismo, con otras iglesias cristianas, con otras religiones, de que muchas personas se acercaron de nuevo, perdieron un poco el temor y se acercaron de nuevo a la fe de sus mayores.
Y muchas veces cuando a las personas les va mal, pues tienden a acudir a algún lugar, bien para dar, diríamos, libre vía o vías libres a sus necesidades espirituales, pero también sus necesidades económicas.
Hace unos años hemos tenido ayuda de distintas organizaciones judías y con esto podemos ayudar a la comunidad en la forma que podemos. Si podemos monetariamente lo hacemos así, si no espiritualmente con nuestro esfuerzo en trabajo tanto intelectual como físico. Y bueno, ya ven cómo nuestra vida judía se desarrolla aquí normalmente. Es un país en que hay mucha tranquilidad, no hay problemas de terrorismo, no hay problemas de discriminación.
El futuro de la comunidad hebrea en Cuba es incierto.
pero mirando el futuro desde hoy. Se puede ser mucho más optimista que si hubiéramos mirado el futuro como mirábamos el futuro también hace 15 años. Creemos sinceramente que si dejamos que Cuba siga su camino, va a haber cambios importantes, porque esto no es un país del Medio Oriente. Esto no es un país del Medio Oriente. Cuba es un país de contraste. Pero Cuba quiere caminar hacia el futuro de la mano de la ciencia, la tecnología, la educación y la cultura. Y los pueblos así no dan marcha atrás. No damos marcha atrás. Si nosotros estamos hoy mejor que hace 15 años, si alguien no se mete con nosotros, dentro de 15 años vamos a estar mejor que hoy.
Los dirigentes no les falta nada, ellos tienen de todo, pero la gente está sufriendo. Y yo soy de las que creía, están sufriendo, ellos fueron los que decidieron quedarse, ellos escogieron su destino. Pero uno no sabe el inside, como decimos nosotros, de la historia, de las circunstancias, de lo que han pasado. ¿Y qué fue lo que sucedió porque ellos se quedaron? No hay un modelo. Entonces hay que ser más humano, más caritativo y más comprensivo. Y hay que ayudar y dar un poco de ti. Pensar menos en ti y un poquito más en los demás.
People in general have a need for a spiritual commitment. Everyone is searching. Regardless of your religious orientation, every faith has people who constantly search for the spiritual meaning of life. You know, we see it in cartoons, we see it in advertisements. You know, what is the meaning of life? Everybody wants to know that answer. And I think when people come to a new place and they don't know who they are, they don't know the language, they don't know the culture, they're searching, they look for meaning. And when sitting alone, the emptiness and void of your life causes you to be a little bit more introspective and search for meaning. I think that also could have contributed to the need for Jewish people to maintain their heritage, their culture. When everything around you is strange and alien, there's a tremendous comfort level in knowing the prayers and reciting the prayers and going through the rituals, lighting the candles, lifting the cup of wine, sitting at a Seder, hearing Kol Nidre. It's like hearing a song from your youth. You know where you are, you know where you came from, you know where you're going.
My remembrances of Havana are within the limitations, the financial limitations of the family, were good memories. And we used to hang out with a lot of the non-Jewish kids, a lot of negritos, a lot of mulaticos, and really was a good way to grow. We acquired a lot of, I would say one of the main ingredients was that we became streetwise at quite an early age. And so we were living the life of the Cuban people in our neighborhood, and then we had our Jewish life within the walls of our home, which is a very common trait. So we were not different, only because we had the Cuban flavor in Cuba, which was a very simpatico place. We never really felt threatened by the population, even so that they called us polacos or turcos. It was not done in a derogatory manner. At least I never felt it. In Cuba, they said, ser pesado es más malo que ser un criminal. It means that if you were a heavyweight, you were not simpatico, they would accept a criminal first as their friend than you because they call you rompegrupos, pesados, and all of that. There was a lot of nobility The music, I was always impressed. I have in my blood the Cuban music. The flavor of Cuba, the mix, all the different mulattoes and blacks, all this mixed and brought in a tremendous feeling. It's a country with feeling, still today with soul, in spite of all the great difficulties that the Cuban population suffers.
Spanish flavor is a certain openness. I mean, they wear their emotion on their sleeve. Their love is love. Their warmth is warmth. They have a, and while they've done well in the marketplace, they have somehow or other retained, they won't like me to say it, the European charm.
That's the only thing I'm really sorry about, that they lose something, because I myself, when I read a book in Spanish or when I read a book in English, I think my mind is more open, you know? It's more open to people because I know the two cultures. If you're too much into one culture, then you don't understand other people. And that's not a way to live, you know? You have to understand everybody. Everybody's a human being. To preserve the culture, the family is the only way, the family.
When I have a family, I think the thing I'm most concerned about preserving is the culture behind the language. If I'm able to pass that on to my kids, then hopefully something will be preserved.
I know my grandparents. A lot of my friends, you know, they don't really know who their grandparents are. I've spoken to my grandparents. Like, I've had conversations with them. They tell me stories about what it was like in Cuba. And licorice was a penny instead of 25 cents or $1, and the movies were 5 cents. Now we got it for free on the satellite. They don't understand that now, you know? We got to explain to them.
It was like weird when I was a kid because we always had to go to like museums.
When I was a kid?
All right, when I was younger, when I was like 7 or 8, when we always had to go to like the museums, like the Cuban Jewish Museum. When I saw my grandfather when he was like my age playing baseball and volleyball, and like I saw like him in the pictures, like, and now I like realize like all of his stories. Like I thought he was lying. I'd rather be like at the movies with friends or playing football or something. But like now I realize that it was important that I had to go to keep the Cuban life in our family.
It's so awkward to know that like it's ending, you know? Like, hopefully soon we'll be able to go back to Cuba and like visit places that they visited.
I think another thing that they gave us is an appreciation for the United States, because they love this country and the freedom it gives them.
And how we're lucky about the decisions they made to come to America. Even though they love their country, Cuba, they knew it was time to leave, take everything that they had, and start all over again in America. And like, even though they knew it wasn't easy, but they knew that for their children and for their children's children, they had to do it. They had to make the move.
The question is therefore, why do you have Cuban Jews here in America who speak Spanish, every Friday night don't have chicken and rice, they have arroz con pollo, and whose children and grandchildren speak Spanish? I don't speak Polish. My children will not speak Polish. But you've got third-generation Cuban Jews who speak Spanish at home. And I think one of the important things that we have to understand is that the Latin culture is not antagonistic necessarily to Judaism. It's family-oriented, it's music-oriented, it's dance-oriented, it's loud, it's full of life. And from what I understand, all in all, there were episodes of anti-Semitism, but all in all, in Cuba, anti-Semitism was the exception, not the rule. So when these Cuban Jews came to America, they weren't necessarily antagonistic to the culture that they had left. Politically, they're antagonistic to Castro and to communism, and that was the only reason why they left Cuba.
The people of Cuba have an agent of the national security in their minds. They have been terrorized. 60-some% of the people in Cuba have been born under this regime. And we don't want the bloodshed in Cuba. We just want to finish that. The situation is very grave.
Very difficult to say that we will go to Cuba to establish businesses. However, in the Cuban community, as you know, we have in Miami over 1 million Cubans, non-Jewish, Cubans, that are waiting to go back to Cuba at all costs. And they are sure that they will go back there one day, and they will help to develop Cuba again into a democratic country with businesses, factories, and trying to rebuild what has been destroyed during these 43 years.
El sueño mío era mi casa, y la verdad que me había fabricado una casona que era una belleza de verdad, ya te digo, en media manzana de terreno, en un lugar alto, donde por un lado tenía un río que me pasaba por una parte y el mar por otro lado, muy bonito, un lugar que se llama Cojima. Y yo, que a mi edad, ¿qué puedo hacer en Cuba ya? Sí, mi casa, muy linda, muy bonita. Bueno, ya ese sueño pues quedó atrás.
My father already was here and he was trying to do another business because he said, you know, this is gone. We have Castro here for 20 years, he said one night. If he doesn't go in 6 months, he said, Castro's going to be here for 20 years. And look, he's been there 43. So he was right.
I believe my father-in-law was very smart, and he never thought that they were going to go back. And we might as well establish our business in New York rather than in Miami. But the cold weather, we didn't like it, so we stayed in Miami. Maybe it was more inconvenient for a young company. But we did all right. But he said, I want to be as close as possible to the Statue of Liberty. Something, I don't want this to happen to me in another country and then come back to here. I'd rather stay here, although this is more difficult country, and more competition because the big companies, etc. But that's the way we stay in Miami, and thank God we did okay. Well, no question about that. We miss Cuba, and Cuba was a very nice country to all the immigrants with open arms, and we were raised there. We had the communities there. We married there, and it would be interesting to go back if the country becomes democratic again.
Ser cubano no me arrepiento de serlo porque nací en Cuba y esa es mi patria, pero las tradiciones nuestras de ser judío es una tradición que en mi corazón siempre vive lleno de orgullo. Yo he tratado de ser siempre un poquito más todos los días, no ser más judío que nadie, pero para mí ser un poquito más judío cada día.
I think that we lived a life in Cuba, a very rich life, even us that didn't have money. It was a wonderful life. It's not only sentiments, a la melancolía of a place that you left, because everyone that lives a country has that feeling. But Cuba was really a paradise. For a young man, I left when I was 28. Man, to be in love in Cuba was beautiful. To hear the music in Cuba, to the streets of Havana, the Malecón, all the things that we had, which today compared in the beauty that we had seen in different places that are fantastic. But the memories of Cuba and our years at the size that we were at that time, there's something that remains with you. But I think that maybe it's a natural phenomenon. When you can go back and can go through many times, I've gone 800-900 miles from Oriente to Havana. And definitely there are more beautiful places in the world, but to me, going through Las Ocho Villas in Cuba between two mountains and seeing the sun in the orange fields around Hawaii Grande, or Holguín, or Santiago de Cuba, were meaningful. That was us, because I was a Cubano, no un judío corriendo, no un judío cobarde, un cubano que quiere mucho su patria.
Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé mi vida, dejé mi amor. Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé enterrado mi corazón.
Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé mi vida, dejé mi amor.
Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé enterrado mi corazón.
Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé mi vida, dejé mi amor.
Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé enterrado mi corazón.
Cuando salí de Cuba, dejé mi vida, dejé mi amor.
Salí de casa una noche aventurera, buscando ambiente de placer y de alegría.